Good evening, everybody. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. It is September 3rd, 2020. I am Mike Capuano. I am the chair of the Planning Board. With me tonight are Amelia Aboff, Sam Dinning, Rob Buchanan, and Jahan Habib. The agenda that we are meeting virtually, and I'm obligated to read our little disclaimer. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15th, 2020. This meeting of the Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. We will have an audio recording available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. This meeting is being recorded for all of you in attendance. We have one item on the agenda. It is a public hearing on case MPSP number 2020-0002, which is 101 to 153 South Street. I will ask for the clerk of the planning board to read in the notice of public hearing for this new public hearing, please.
This is MPSP 2020-0002, 101 to 153 South Street. Boynton Yards Landco LLC proposes a master plan in the Boynton Yards sub area of the Master Plan Development Overlay District, which requires a master plan special permit for a 6.8 acre development site, including a thoroughfare, multiple civic spaces totaling approximately 45,000 square feet, and 6 buildings totaling approximately 1.365 million square feet, including approximately 985,000 square feet of commercial space, 340,000 square feet of residential space, 10% art space, and 20,000 square feet for a community center. Other addresses inclusive of this application are 34 Ward, 29 Harding, and 33 Earl Street.
Right. Thank you very much, Sam. I believe we do have one disclosure by a member of the planning board before we get.
I will be recusing myself.
Amelia?
I will be recusing myself from this item.
Okay, great.
Chair, it's Rebecca. I'm trying to figure out why we're having so many audio problems. If everyone just hang on for a minute, I'm going to look at it.
Could I ask for whoever's playing pot drums with children to stop, please? Or at least mute yourself. Continue with the pot drums. Thank you. I thought the rhythm was great, honestly. All right. So we are proceeding with Amelia having recused herself. We will be calling the applicant at 101 to 153 South Street to make a presentation. So if staff could please unmute whomever will be making presentation on behalf of the applicant.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Give us just a minute. We're having a couple audio issues.
That's fine. If you want to bring back pot drums, I'm fine for the interim.
Hang on one.
Thank you.
John Fenton, I have unmuted you. Are you able to speak at this moment?
I think so. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak tonight from your
I
team?
think Rola Indris. And I think she also, we want to be able to, I don't know if we can do this now, but we want to be able to share the, our deck, presentation deck.
Yes, absolutely. Who wants to be who is going to be presenting?
Rolla Indris.
Okay.
And then
I have-
also Rob Dickey and John Sullivan will also be presenting a portion of this.
All right. I have made Rolla a presenter and I have unmuted her line.
Great, thanks, Rebecca.
Rolla, you can share your screen at any time. There we go.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. We're just having some technical issues. Your continued patience is appreciated. All right, I think we're ready to go.
Great. You think Rob and both Rob and John have ability to speak when the time's right?
Yes, John, I'm here and I think I'm unmuted.
Okay, great.
I'm
I
here
think
as
I'll
well,
begin
John,
then.
thanks.
Is that you, John?
Yeah.
Well, then I think I'll begin. I want to thank you, Rebecca, and the board for taking the time to attend this meeting. I'd like to say hello and good evening to everyone else that's here. My name is John Fenton. I'm a partner with DLJ Real Estate Capital Partners. And also joining me tonight is my co-development partner, Rob Dickey, the Executive Vice President at Legg McCall Properties. And I'd like to begin with a brief project summary and then reintroduce Rob, followed by Rolla Indris, also of Legg McCall. And then John Sullivan, our lead architect with Spagnola Guises, and he'll dive into the master plan. And I think there'll be time for questions. I'm not exactly sure how that will be formatted, but it'd be directed, I think, by Rebecca and the board. So I won't go into the official announcements because you've defined for everybody what the legal parameters are of this project. I will say that we're here today as Boynton Yards Landco LLC applying for a master plan special permit in the Boynton Yards sub area of the master plan development overlay district under the new Somerville zoning ordinance. Currently, we're very excited, I have to say, to be here talking to you about this. We've been working on it for a long time, and we look forward to working with you. The site is currently an inaccessible and underutilized industrial area with very limited residential development. The reconnection will come with improved pedestrian walkways, bike lanes, and street access, all within a 5-minute walk from the new Union Square station that you can see in the upper left-hand corner of this aerial. But you can also see that there's not much development there. The buildings that are on our site, one of which has been demolished, are underutilized from buildings from a different era, basically. We can do this by reimagining this former rail yard and underutilized industrial site into an 18-hour mixed-use live, work, play campus. It's a place for emerging life science and tech companies, local businesses, and residents to grow and thrive together. The plan outlined in our application includes dramatic new road and infrastructure improvements to knit the area together and reconnect Boynton Yards with Somerville's bustling Union Square and nearby Inman Square in Cambridge. About 6 years ago, we were drawn to Somerville for its culture, its people, its diversity, and its community planning. We're intrigued by the evolution of Summer Vision and the city's comprehensive plan, the Union Square neighborhood plan, and Somerville's new zoning ordinance. And frankly, we're still intrigued. Our thinking was that this development could be more than just a transformational impact, but one of revival and economic and community leadership. Importantly, this will be an extension of Somerville's continued bright spark and a new destination that will complement and compete with neighboring Kendall Square. Over the past 6 years, we spent many hours with city officials in planning and zoning and engineering meetings to understand and implement the goals of the Somerville's comprehensive plan. We came to better understand that Boynton Yards was a place to create a new vision from the ground up, based on summer vision and the collective vision of Mayor Curatone, Councilman J.T. Scott, and a community-based and committed to a collaborative planning process. 101 South Street will be the first purpose-built lab building in Somerville, and soon it will mark significant progress in coming weeks with a strong Shawmut construction team and its union steelworkers topping off the building with its final beam later this month. In general, over the next 5 years, Boynton Yards can deliver over $25 million in community benefits and close to $40 million in new tax revenues. We look forward to continuing the progress with the future buildings after we move through this master plan. And with that, I'd like to hand this over to Rob and have him talk a little bit about, the team's capabilities and the market as we see it.
Thank you, John. And thank you, board members and public, for attending this meeting and spending the time reviewing our project. So we had the good fortune of reconnecting with DLJ, who we as a firm had done prior partnerships with and prior co-investments with dating back to the late 90s. So we reconnected with DLJ 2.5 years ago, and have been working with John and his team supporting this effort during that time. So that has been a great opportunity for us, and I think our complementary skill sets as firms have been a great match in this instance, and we're very, very excited about the opportunity. Leggett McCall, for those that don't know us, is a firm that's been a local and privately held firm in the Boston market for over 50 years. We bring a specific expertise in these types of urban mixed-use projects, and we have a very strong office, lab, residential, and sort of local retail element to what we do and focus on today. We've been involved in over 2.5 million square feet of lab space and research space in the Boston market. And this being fundamentally at its core a research campus with a mixed use, as John mentioned, 18-hour component that includes residential and community and local retail. This is something that we enjoy, we do a lot of, and we look forward to seeing to its successful execution as a member of this partnership. The one thing I will mention is that one of the things that I think points this project in a very successful direction, beyond all the hard work of team members and the community and the city in making this happen, is that we have appropriately capitalized this project. That said, we are in a period of somewhat uncertainty given what's happened since March and the onset of the pandemic. So while we remain very, very optimistic, we also are realists that we face certain headwinds in the market, and we hope we have a building under construction, we're delivering on time, and we're optimistic about the future. But I just mentioned that because that is a reality of the marketplace we all live in today. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Rola Idris, who will address other aspects of the project.
Just incidentally, I just interrupt before Rola starts, but Rola has been involved with this project going back almost as long as I have. She worked for the design architect that started with this building, and once it was kind of designed, we always had intended to get it to a larger firm to execute a big project like this, and we shifted from Hashim Sarkis Design Studio to Spagnola Geisens. But the beauty of this is that Rola worked from the beginning on this, and then actually moved to Leggett McCall, so she's still on the team, but she enjoys a lot of continuity with where we started and where we are now.
Thanks, John and Rob. So as John mentioned earlier, we're here tonight to present our proposed master plan to the planning board as we seek master plan special permit. If approved, entitlement of each individual thoroughfare, civic space, and building that we'll be discussing in upcoming slides will occur through subsequent development review by the city, neighborhood, and planning board. We're targeting fall 2020 for our second building and first civic space, and the following 2 years for the next 2 buildings. Our site is located on the edge between Somerville and Cambridge line. The neighborhood is well positioned to become a primary economic engine due to its proximity to a number of commercial centers, transit, and highway access. We're a 5-minute walk to the forthcoming Union Square Green Line station, making us close to Union Square. We're also a 7-minute walk to Inman Square and a 10-minute walk to Kendall Square, our neighboring life science hub. With the new Green Line extension, the site will be well connected to downtown Boston as well. There are several criteria that a master plan development in Boynton Yards must meet, and they include providing for 20% civic space, 75% of the development's gross square footage as commercial space, and 25% as residential. The plan should provide 10% of commercial floor area as arts and creative enterprises, as well as 5% of that same area, or 20,000 square feet, whatever is smaller, as a community center. All buildings, depending on the type, should also target LEED Platinum, Zero Carbon, or FIAS Plus certifiable. Our plan meets all these requirements. As we went through a process of urban design, we also adhered closely to the city's urban design framework, a document that stresses on coordinated planning, development, architecture, and landscape design. Some of the key elements that are part of our plan, as you will see in the next section, are a walkable street network, parcels that allow for commercial buildings and below-grade parking, new civic spaces, space for arts and creative uses, a community center, and the creation of an 18-hour neighborhood. Our plan also implements recommendations of Summer Vision, the Union Square Neighborhood Plan, and Climate Forward. Our site, seen here in the black dashed boundary lines within the Boynton Yards district, shown here in purple. We are in close proximity to commercial activity zones, shown here in yellow, Inman Square and Cambridge Street to the south, and Union Square to our northwest. Our site will also create a number of civic green spaces, which will complement and form a network with other future green spaces shown here in light green. Our plan creates a new street network and aligns to the larger grid system proposed for the district. The network is based on lateral streets that aim, can you guys see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay. So lateral streets that aim to connect to Webster Street on the west and Medford on the east. So on the north, a new street called Thoroughfare 1 will connect Columbia and Windsor Place to Ward Street, and to the south, South Street will continue and eventually be realigned to connect to Webster. Secondary streets also leave our site closer to the adjacent fabric of the neighborhood. Multiple bus stations are in close proximity, as well as the main transit line directly to our northwest, leading to Union Square Station. The previous slide showed our street networks and connections to transit. However, along with mobility management, the goal is to reduce the number of vehicular trips in the neighborhood. We've taken a lot of time to prioritize design considerations for pedestrians first, as well as cyclists. The purple thick lines are thoroughfares drawn by the city, which we've integrated into our plan. The orange dashed dot lines show pedestrian paths. We will be making significant walkability improvements through ample and wide sidewalks, scaled roadways, street trees, and on the north, Thoroughfare 1 will be a curbless street. The dotted blue lines show bike paths that we connect to on both east and west, and at our site scale are provided through buffered bike lanes on South Street, as well as Windsor Place. Additionally, all buildings will have ample bike parking within and outside the building. This image is a rendering, and it shows that street on the north that we're talking about, Thoroughfare 1. It's a curbless street that encourages pedestrian activity and blends with our civic spaces, wide sidewalks to create a friendly, inviting, accessible, and inclusive environment. Our proposal is phased, as any development of this scale takes years to implement. We have 4 main phases. Each includes buildings, civic spaces, and road and infrastructure improvements. Phase 1 includes Building 1 or 101 South, currently under construction, and an interim park that will later become the neighborhood park for Civic Space 1. A new sidewalk on the south side of Thoroughfare 1, sidewalks, street trees, and improvements to Earl Street, as well as infrastructure improvements are all included in this phase. Phase 2 includes the construction of Building 2 and Civic Space 1, the park between Building 1 and 2. The sidewalk on the north of Thoroughfare 1 and utility upgrades, which we'll talk about, utility upgrades will also take place. Phase 3 includes Building 3, finalizing Thoroughfare 1, and utility upgrades that will be presented later on in the presentation. Phase 4 is the last phase and includes Building 4 and Civic Spaces 2 and 3. In here, the coloring, just for your reference, all the blue is commercial lab space and the red is residential. Civic Spaces 2 and 3 are behind.
Would you mind if I interrupt you for 1 second? We got a question saying that at least one person was unable to see the presentation. I'm just curious if that's something that is unique to this person or something that folks are experiencing as well.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I did see that, and I would like to ask, please, if all of the board members first can acknowledge by either a thumbs up or a shaking of your head that you can see the screen.
Yes.
All right. Members of the public, could you please raise your hand, use the raise hand feature if you cannot see the screen? All right, it does seem like the majority of people can see the screen. We will work things out with the team to see that the slides will be made available in some format after this. I'm gonna look into that while the presentation is ongoing. So hang on just a second.
Rebecca, I want to clarify that all of this will be available on the city's website. We are certainly not taking a vote this evening. We're going to be extending public comment for a period of time following this. So anyone that is unable to see this presentation this evening for whatever reason will have ample opportunity after this to be able to see it and to provide written comment before this board takes any future steps in taking a vote on this application for master plan special permit. So I just wanted to make sure everybody in the attendee list knew that this is certainly not the end of the line. You will have an opportunity to see this and to provide your testimony.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking again. I do want to confirm that the application materials for that were sent to the board this evening are currently on our reports and decisions page. We will work with the applicant, and I'm sure that we can get the presentation posted to the reports and decisions page promptly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just repeat the last sentence I had said. The last phase includes Building 4, which is residential, and there's 2 civic spaces alongside that, as well as utility work to support those buildings. We further anticipate that South Street will be realigned, and the green space will become part of our site and enlarge Civic Space 1. With that, I'll hand over to John Sullivan from SGA, who will talk about our site design.
Thank you, Rolla. My name is John Sullivan. I am a partner at SGA, and we are the master plan architect for the site, as well as the executive architect for 101 South Street. We've been working with Rolla, John, and Rob, and the team for over the past 2 years, and I'm very excited to be here to present details of this plan to the board and to the community. So looking at a survey of the existing conditions, it's important to highlight that the site itself is 6.5 acres. Towards the center of the site, 101 South Street, as was noted before, is currently under construction. And the site, in its current form has low scale industrial buildings, Gentle Giant property to the upper right, a lot of surface parking. And for anyone who's, traversed this part of Boynton Yards, it's really not pedestrian friendly, and you feel, disconnected from the neighborhood street network. As part of the proposed condition, it's organized around a redefined street grid that, that threads this back into Somerville's, established network, and proposes a pedestrian thoroughfare, which we're calling Thoroughfare 1, as well as several civic spaces that ultimately define an organization that supports 4 primary parcels: 101 South Street to the middle of the site, Parcel 2 to the west, Parcel 3 to the east, and Parcel 4 to the north. So these parcels support what what will ultimately be expressed as 4 primary buildings, but from a technical standpoint, blocks 3 and 4 incorporate a concept that merges multiple buildings to form a larger building, and that was done to comply with the zoning's building typologies. And we work closely with the planning staff to establish that. But for the sake of this presentation, we'll refer to the buildings just by their numbers. And the aggregate of what's being proposed is over 1.3 million square feet of development. Of that 1.3 million square feet, 75% of that represents commercial use in alignment with the zoning ordinance, which is located to the southern portion of the site. These buildings are intended to support life science users, to support Somerville's growing research cluster. The remaining northern parcel will accommodate residential use. This represents 25% of the total build out. And again, to earlier comments, really supports the idea of an 18-7 mixed use environment in this district. I think it's important to highlight that 10% of the commercial space will be reserved for creative arts and enterprise users. This is to sustain and grow Somerville's rich creative culture. And 20% of the site, which is over an acre, will be dedicated to 3 primary civic spaces to serve as an amenity to the district. The ground floor uses are organized around the pedestrian street and these civic spaces, and it may be helpful here to identify that there's a large civic space being proposed for the center of the site between 101 South Street and Building 2, a smaller one to the west of Building 4, and one that is to the east of Building 4 over towards Harding Street. And in addition to that, there is a significant amount of open space outside of the civic space designation. The ground floor uses are organized around the pedestrian street, which is Thoroughfare 1 connecting Windsor Street to Harding Street, as well as the civic spaces. And the areas that you see identified in purple and blue represent building lobbies, community retail and arts focused spaces. And we feel like this is really intended to activate the edges and really make this a pedestrian friendly and and walkable environment. Thoroughfare 1 is curbless, as Rolla had mentioned, and this also supports cyclist use through the primary spine of the site. Vehicular travel is focused to the edges of the site. There's some entry points that favor the South Street side of the site to again to kind of reserve the inner parts of the site to focus on pedestrian travel. And Earl Street has been set up as more of a service corridor to support parking entries, loading entries, as well as a little bit of an alley extension for Building 4 to support vehicular access there. So the goal is to keep the cars away from the heart of the site and consolidate where it made sense. Within that thought process, the parking kind of follows suit. All of the parking here will be subgrade. And it's access from, for 101 South Street, Building 4 and Building 3 is access from Earl Street, again, consolidating that vehicular, travel. It's important to note that these spaces will not be reserved, will be open to the public. And again, this is a subgrade configuration for all of these buildings. Bicycle parking will also be a major, component of the project, to tie into the bike lanes that are being provided in and around the site. And several long-term and short-term, spaces, as you can see on this chart, will be provided to support each building. So when we look at this vertically and address the massing, again, we're showing, what's identified in blue are the commercial life science buildings to the south of the site. What's identified in red is the residential building, and this represents a range of heights. The building 2 and building 3, which will be the two next life science buildings, will be are being proposed to be 12 stories with an average height of 185 feet. And then the residential building, the massing shifts there to range from about 75 feet to about 185 feet. So at this point in the master plan process, these massings are defined for height and size. More specific attention will be paid during the special permit process to refine the massing, to respond more directly to its immediate context, street edges, critical view corridors, and those types of considerations. And then, just the next image here highlights kind of the continuation of this thought from a longer term perspective in alignment with the city's goals. So this shows South Street being aligned to serve as a major, connection between Medford Street and Webster Street. And it also shows how our central civic space can expand to be part of more of a district-wide, public open space to fulfill, the goals of the urban design framework. And that's really what I think we collectively think is one of the most exciting parts of this project is really just the opportunity to provide a significant amount of open space and active space on this site. As highlighted before, this type of density unlocks that because it allows us to preserve a significant amount of space at the ground plane. I mentioned over an acre of space, as you kind of see here, designated as the darker green civic spaces are provided, which exceeds the 20% threshold. But more than that, out of the 6.5 acre site, 52% of that is dedicated to open space and public realm, and that translates into over 3 acres of land. Focus on creating that ground plane experience. The civic spaces themselves will be further defined, during the special permit process, but just offer a wonderful opportunity to support a range of community activities. Including larger spaces that can accommodate gathering, performances, festivals, in concert with smaller spaces, which may be more passive, focused on community agriculture, public art, or just to provide, areas of recreation and respite. So we've had a productive dialogue with the city's Department of Open Space and Urban Forestry to date. And again, as these spaces get more further defined during the special permit process, we're excited to, to continue that conversation. And I think looking at this here, this just describes what we're most excited about, what we think can just be such an active and vibrant, environment that we're focused on creating. This is the view from the civic space facing back towards the entry of 101 South Street. And it just highlights, a variety of plantings, softscapes, hardscapes, seating areas, active edges, and what we think is just going to be a really vibrant, center to the community. And then at the pedestrian scale, the buildings will be designed in a way to really promote those active edges and to encourage spill out from local retail, art spaces, create some porosity that can, really activate this and, make the bases of these buildings come to life. So we're very excited by the environment that can be created here and how that supports the development as a whole. Two other areas that I'll hit upon are, transportation and infrastructure. Those are big parts of the development of this size. As it relates to transportation, our consultant VHB has conducted a comprehensive traffic impact and access study, considering over 15 roadways and intersections surrounding our site at Boynton Yards. Their counts were done during critical weekday morning, evening, as well as Saturday midday peak hours. And I think it's important to note that the counts were done before the recent detours associated with the MBTA bridge reconstruction, as well as before our current COVID-19 situation. They've also considered future considerations relating to normal traffic growth, as well as growth associated with nearby development projects, including US2 and others, as well as considering the proximity to the planned Green Line extension, as well, kind of in terms of how many of the site visitors will be expected to drive. They, feeling that most people coming to the site will be focused on public transit, supported by the Green Line extension or alternate means of transit, including biking. So, this as highlighted before, everything from a planning perspective that's done here is meant to support the future realignment of South Street and other, critical connectivity in the area. Each building will provide, parking, which, to support the building, but at a lowered count to really promote public transit, as well as bicycle and pedestrian focus improvements as well. From a infrastructure standpoint, our goals are to replace the existing and outdated public and private utilities with new water, sewer, storm drain, and electric, as well as some other utility infrastructure. Constructing new separated storm drains and sewer mains, and decommissioning existing combined sewer drains from our development site. A big part of this is dedicating land to the city to support a new subgrade 3 million gallon stormwater detention tank in the kind of northeast part of our site, which will support the Boynton Yards neighborhood beyond our development. So with this, a project will increase the permeable open space by approximately 10% over the existing conditions, with over 20,000 square feet of vegetated and landscaped area, and almost 10,000 square feet of permeable paper zone. So we have a big impact as it relates to surface runoff. And with that, the utility infrastructure improvements have been closely coordinated with the city's engineering department. So we're excited by the progress made. So with that, I will turn it back to Rolla, who will walk us through our sustainability strategies.
Thanks, John.
But before you get started, I just want to make a quick point to folks who are in the audience. We've seen a number of questions that are raised in the question section of this particular application. And for folks that are not familiar with the way that public hearings work, your questions can be raised and your comments can be raised through the period of time where we open it up to public testimony, which is after the applicant's presentation and any questions that the board has. In addition to public testimony this evening, we will be opening it up to written testimony for a period of time that we will determine at the close of this meeting for you to email your questions and your comments and your testimony to the board and to staff and to the applicant through planning@somervillema.gov. We receive all of your public testimony, so if you don't want to speak tonight, if you want to take a look at the presentation, think about it and come back to us within the next couple of weeks. You are certainly more than welcome to do that. If you want to present your testimony tonight in addition, you're obviously more than welcome to do that as well. I just wanted to, before we finished up this section, I did see some questions, and I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that this is how we operate, both in public hearings generally and also through our new universe of virtual meetings. So I would like to invite the applicant and Rolla to continue her presentation. I'm sorry to have interrupted you. I just wanted to make sure that folks in the audience knew that they would have an opportunity to speak tonight if they want.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. The master plan addresses citywide sustainability goals and defines 5 key areas that will be refined further with the design of each building, civic space, and road network. The 5 areas are neighborhood integration and wellness, carbon, water, energy, and resilience. Our goals follow from Somerville's climate forward goals to reduce the city's contribution to and mitigate the impact of climate change, as well as work towards carbon neutrality. As you'll see on this slide and the next, we define the 5 key areas further in terms of a set of goals: open spaces, pedestrian paths, a tree planting strategy with structural cells and large tree canopies, tree species diversity, daylight control, and touchless technology are some of the neighborhood integration and wellness goals. Reduction in carbon footprint includes smart material selection and reduced greenhouse gas emissions, a green infrastructure and stormwater plan, future storage tank for stormwater mitigation and sewer separation, low flow and low flush plumbing fixtures, as well will address sustainable water measures. Other goals under energy and resilience include targeting LEED Platinum and Passive House, depending on building type, high efficiency chillers and boilers, energy recovery systems, as well as an increase in pervious area, reduction of heat island effects, and green roofs or PV panels where possible. There are a number of other goals. I didn't read them all, but feel free to browse through once you have this presentation. Community. Our master plan holds integration and response to the community as a priority and is always at the forefront of our design and development work. Given that we're in a pandemic, we will be seeking to respond through technology by relying on data analytics to inform our buildings and generate reports to dynamically monitor performance. We will also be working closely with our mechanical engineers to make sure our indoor air quality responds to the levels needed to address COVID or similar events. MERV 16 filters, high number of air exchanges per hour, minimize air infiltration at facades are some of the points we're exploring. Outdoor air quality is just as important as indoor. With our multiple civic spaces and pocket parks, we're designing the landscape and selecting trees that enhance air quality for an environment that can be enjoyed with proper social distancing while safely and mindfully immersing in nature. With that, I'll hand over to John Fenton, who will conclude our community response and benefits.
Thank you, Rolla. I mean, we spent a lot of time in the community talking with Union Square residents and community groups. We learned about and experienced the uniqueness of Union Square and its location. And frankly, we've listened, to everyone. I personally mourn the passing of Bill McCabe's in Thunder Road, but I hope there'll be room for their musical offsprings in Boynton Yards. In the meantime, please support Union Square's other remaining music venues, because I think that's part of the culture that has drawn us here. We supported the Union Square Farmers Market and the Somerville Cares COVID Relief Fund. And in addition, our master plan will deliver a plethora of additional community benefits, including over $65 million over the next 5 years and over 2 acres of open space, whether that be privately owned open space and open to the public, or publicly controlled open space and open to the public. We project, we've already committed to and are paying over $6 million of community benefits as it relates to our first building. And over the 5 years going forward, it'll amount to more like 24 million of combined community benefits. When stabilized, the project anticipates to deliver $12 million of annual taxes, and will deliver $10 million to the Affordable Housing Trust based on the commercial building sizes and the allocation in that benefit package. In addition, we'll contribute $2.5 million to the Green Line extension. We talk about the open space, be repeating it, but I think you've got that at this point. I mean, the LEED qualifications is LEED Gold on the first building, and then LEED Platinum on all the future lab buildings, which is not easy, but we're gonna do it, and we'll be one of the first people to do that. I mean, across the nation, it's not a technology right now that is standard. We've basically gotten to know Union Square's local companies and our neighbors like Taza, Union Square Donuts, and Bow Street Market, and we plan to collaborate with them in Boynton Yards to keep Somerville's soul alive. And we hope to be able to talk more about this, but in closing, we're very excited about the long-term commitment that this represents, and really a way for Somerville and Massachusetts to bounce back from this pandemic. We feel fortunate, all of us feel fortunate to be in the life science industry right now. And as Rob said, the environment is fragile, but right now the market's bullish on this product, and we just are very hopeful to move forward with this and start to deliver some of the benefits that we've talked about.
Thank you very, very much for your presentation. I'm sure that you all know, and our staff knows, and I'm certain that, other members of the board know that Boynton Yards has been a goal of positive development now for at minimum 30 years. I remember when my dad was the mayor, it was one of the first things that he tried to get done, and we couldn't at the time. And we're finally moving into a phase of development where this is really becoming a positive feature of Somerville, of our commercial base. And I'm very, very excited that you are before us tonight for this application. I have a couple of questions before I open it up to other members of the board, and then again before I open it up to members of the public. It may be in your application, and I may have missed it, but who owns or controls the parcel that is south of South Street, where building, I think you call it building 2 is, where, so when South Street straightens out,
Yep.
that portion south of that building, right at the intersection.
This is John Fenton talking now, and there are a number of owners actually. The city owns about 16,000 square feet that are separated by a piece of the Nissenbaum land. So on one end, sort of the northwest end of that parcel. Yeah, Roll, if you can help me, that'd be great. You can see the cars down there in Nissenbaum's parcel, and you can see a brownish area up in the northwest corner. That's where the South Street Farm is, and the city owns that land. And then on the opposite corner along South Street, there's another little corner that's about 6,000 feet. The area on the left-hand corner is 11,000 feet. It's about 5,000 feet on the opposite end. So there's about 16,000 feet there. And, the notion that the plan, the urban design framework suggests is that a road would be driven, generally parallel, straightening out South Street all the way to Webster. And the dimensions of that road are pretty similar to the dimensions of the road that we're contributing as well. And but having said that, in order to get the green space that that the urban design framework requires, it would have to be contributed by the city in the form of the road left behind, and their 2 parcels, and then some more land off of the Nissenbaum land, plus of course the road, would have to be created as well.
All right, no, thank you. I appreciate that, because obviously if the intent is to try to expand some open and green space in that parcel, I just want to have an idea in my own head what the likelihood of that being able to happen is, depending on who the owners and or use holders are. I want to ask another few questions. I actually want to make a note that you guys have identified the fact that you're going to be having all underground parking.
Yes.
Okay. It's very interesting to me because you also run quite close to where the Millers River used to be, and we've heard from other folks in other parcels that it was absolutely not possible to have underground parking. It would have been absolutely financially infeasible to do that, and I just want to thank you for committing to that and being able to find a way in your financial projections to be able to make that happen. I know that was a concern for a lot of the neighbors in the Union Square neighborhood for other parcels, and for your particular development, I think this is a huge benefit for folks not having to look at parking structures as they walk, drive, bike by, take the T, and things like that. One other question, it's just something that I have thought of because you were referencing difficulties in, or at least the uncertainties in a pandemic market, is you're still anticipating, I think, a predominance of lab and R&D for the commercial space. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's still panning out in today's market as I understand it. I mean, I know I'm not going back to the office until at least January. I think that's true for a lot of folks. And I take it that you wouldn't be presenting this type of application unless you had a level of confidence that you would be able to make these projects work. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, everything I've read, and you obviously know better than I do, that lab and R&D does require in-person
Yep.
to the extent that it can. So I think this is a solid move forward in commercial space that we're anticipating. And obviously we like to see commercial development where we can because of the tax benefits that it does bring. So I want to thank you for that. Again, I think this is the beginning of a fantastic application that we as a planning board and we as a community have seen in reimagining an area of the city that has been kind of fallow for a very, very long time. What I'd like to do is open it up to other members of the planning board who have questions or comments at this point. And if we don't, I'd like to open it up to the public for their kind of preliminary testimony. So if folks have questions of the applicant or of staff at this moment, please let me know. No, seeing none of my colleagues want to weigh in at this point, I would like to open it up. And for staff, do we have a timer access?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I will be happy to set a 2-minute timer for you.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do at this point, open it up to public testimony for anybody that wants to speak in support of this application. What I want to do is I want to remind folks that this is a preliminary meeting. The board does not intend to vote now, and we do want to hear from all of you, and we want to hear from how the applicant may respond to any questions or concerns by members of the board. So if you have questions or if you have testimony, we want to hear it. I would ask you to exercise your raised hand option, and I will call on you in the order in which I've seen your raised hand, which in this universe right now happens to be alphabetical. So if your name is Zach, you might go last. Okay, the first one I see is Muriel Merchant. And so what I'd like to do is invite you to speak, be unmuted. And for the purpose of our record, please just identify yourself and your residential address for the record.
Hi, yeah, my name is Marielle. I live at 58 Alston Street, up kind of a little closer to East Somerville. And yeah, my only question so far was why the decision was made to build the residential building last.
Mr. Chair, should we be addressing the questions?
Well,
No.
sorry, I don't know if that's
No,
is
no.
questions okay.
No, so let me clarify for folks that might not have been part of the public hearing process in the past. Public testimony is your opportunity to ask questions and to provide thoughts and comments. It is not at this point a question and answer period. If you do have questions that feels that they would like to or can address following the close of public testimony, they will. This is your opportunity to kind of raise your thoughts and your questions so that it's on the mind of everybody. You've been able to be heard, and the applicant may choose to respond at the close of this. I mean, they're not required to. This is just an opportunity for you to speak. I would encourage them to if they have an answer, but that won't happen until the close of public testimony this evening.
Okay, understood. Sorry. Okay, so
No,
I mean,
no problem at all.
still my question.
No problem at all.
And I guess, related to a concern, which is just that, we obviously are facing a housing shortage and a housing crisis. And presumably, I don't know, it's been talked at all about, but like how much of it would be affordable housing. But, again, because this building isn't being planned to be built until 2025. It sounds like discussions about this building in particular, this residential building in particular, are kind of far off. But yeah, so that was just sort of my main query. It was just, why it was decided to do the residential, which is like pretty sorely needed so late in the game. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I'm going to scroll down and see who the next person that I see is. Grandma Downs, you could be muted and we could hear your testimony, please.
Great. Thank you to the board for giving me the opportunity to talk. My name is Rene Mardones, 337 Somerville Avenue. I'm a member of Union United, Affordable Housing Organizing Committee, and the Job for Somerville Committee. And I'm basically testifying regarding the community benefit slides. That was, I think, the 40th slide in the presentation. It seems like most of what is listed there is what is required by the zoning regulation. If I remember correctly, in the negotiation for community benefit agreement with US2, US2 went beyond those zoning requirements. So it seems like here in this project is nothing beyond what the city is requiring for this type of project. 20% inclusionary zoning, the linkage fee for affordable housing for job during the on the commercial space. So my question is there any negotiation with the Union Square Neighbor Council or other groups that are looking into community benefit that are beyond what is required by zoning regulation? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ernie. Next on my list, I see Sarah Dunbar. If she could be unmuted and please provide your testimony.
Hi, I have a really quick comment. It seems like
just introduce yourself and your address.
Oh, yes, sorry. Sarah Dunbar, 79 Columbus Avenue. I was just wondering if they had studied entering the parking to building 2 on the north side, so that if there is this future green space with the city-owned land, that could, make use of the space that currently is shown as an entrance to parking. That's my main question right now.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I'm scrolling down. I see Wiggs Amor. And Tori after Wig.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate these meetings. Everybody's doing a great job with them. I really appreciate that. I've got a couple of comments. I mean, first, I do want to say that these are great partners. Mr. Fenton and DLJ have been good all along. Leggett McCall does have a storied history as a very talented Boston development firm. I want to say that I agree with you. The underground garages are terrific. really appreciate saving the land for buildings and green space. And I also appreciate the nod to MERV 16 air filtration. It is far better than MERV 13. It's got much thicker filters, it's lower maintenance, and it picks up the mid-size ultrafine particles. So as has happened at Assembly Square recently, the move to MERV 16 is good all the way around. With regard to concerns, I'm a little bit concerned of the porosity of the site toward Union Square. All of the north-south roads, and this is really on the city as much as the developers, but all of the north-south roads orient to Cambridge Street, which is a great street, absolutely spectacular urban street, and none of them orient across the tracks to Union Square. And you know, longer term, you really would want multiple crossings of these tracks, not necessarily on these developers, but just leaving that opportunity. And in this regard, I have concerns about the residential three buildings that are joined, 4A, B, and C. And just would remark, without knowing whether it's possible, that if 4A could be moved to the west and you'd have green space kind of coming right through to the tracks. And then if Earl Street could have a opening that goes through the tracks as well, that would really start to create future opportunity of actually linking this to Union Square, which it's not linked to Union Square right now. You have to go all the way to Medford Street or all the way to Prospect Street, which is unfortunate. So I'll just leave those comments and appreciate the opportunity.
Big thank you very, very much. I will, before I move on to our next member of the public who wants to provide testimony, where you've taught me more about MERV filtration than I ever thought to know from many other projects. So I want to thank you for that. I see Tori Antonino, who has raised her hand, so I'd like to unmute Tori and have her provide her testimony.
Hi, my name is Tori Antonino. I live at 65 Boston Street. Thank you for giving the opportunity to speak tonight. I just want to sort of echo one thing Wig said, and that is now I'm unmuted. Okay. That DLJ has been good partners with the community, and when John Fenton says that they have been listening, he is telling the truth, and he has he and the rest of the DLJ partnership has been willing to meet with any community member or group who asks. So I wanted to give them kudos on that. I guess one thing I imagined Boynton Yards having was a central civic space that was a space unto its own with no buildings on it, sort of like a rectangle. So where the second lab building is going, I was imagining that to not be on that spot and just have a full rectangle where you're conglomerating the civic spaces. That said, I do like, I'm not offended by the civic space. I like the north to south orientation, maximizing, you know, having that sort of the length of the parks being in between the buildings and the shorter ends of the parks being on the street. So it provides a sort of linear protected space. I have a lot of small comments, but I don't think I had time enough to get into them. I was just thinking that maybe the parking to bicycle ratio is a little off. I think they're underestimating bicycle parking and perhaps overestimating car parking. So I think that could be looked into a little bit more. I just want to appreciate the landscape architect and John Fenton for committing to doing all native plants and working to use natural systems for stormwater capture. And in fact, Ian is hopefully attending a webinar next week on that. I imagine I'm running out of time. There I am. Okay. So thank you, and I look forward to DLJ being the continued partnership, and I look forward to working with them and you. Thanks, everybody.
Did Tori have her own 2-minute timer, or was that jingle something that staff? That's great.
That is, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. That's my typical timer on my phone.
Okay, all right, I like it. What I'd like to do, I know that there is at least one individual who has been trying to ask questions in the question section of this application. That is not the way we take public testimony. I would encourage anybody that has a question or anybody that has a comment to utilize the raised hand function of this application so that I can call on them so they can actually provide testimony, because that is not recorded, that is not testimony, and we will not be responding to that. So I'm going to scroll down again.
Mr. Chair, I'm understanding that Phil McKenna is trying to raise his hand to speak, so I am going to step in and unmute Phil McKenna so that he
Please
can
do.
speak. Mr. McKenna, you are self-muted. There you go.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm new to this platform, so I appreciate it. Oh, yeah, thank you to the board for hosting this meeting and also for including nearby neighbors in Cambridge in the flyering for this meeting. I live at 135 Willow Street, just across the city line in Cambridge, about 150 meters from building 1 that's now going up. And I'm deeply concerned about the increase in traffic in nearby Cambridge and Somerville neighborhoods due to the proposed development. I'd like to build on what Wiggs said, talking about other north-south connections. And part of my experience too, pre-COVID, at rush hour, I could likely crawl from Boynton Yards to Union Square faster than I could drive. And I am really concerned that this development will only make traffic conditions in my neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods in Somerville much worse. I am really pleased to see the project's focus on pedestrians and bicycles, but I feel that developers need to go further in funding community benefits to reduce vehicular traffic congestion. And I'd just like to go through parts of a petition that I sent earlier today to the board, to city planners, and to the Boynton Yards team, calling for the developers to fully fund what is known as the Earl Street Underpass, and do this as a condition of master plan approval. And this is a petition that was signed by 16 other members of the surrounding Cambridge and Somerville neighborhoods. So just going through the letter, the underpass, as you know, is part of the Union Square neighborhood plan, which would provide a vital connection between Boynton Yards and Union Square, going under the railroad tracks just to the north of the proposed development. The underpass would relieve a key choke point between Somerville and southern Somerville and Cambridge, where I live, and significantly increase pedestrian and bicycle access to the now under construction Union Square T-stop. Does that mean I have 2 minutes?
That means the end of your 2 minutes. I am happy if you'd like to send that to planning@somervillema.gov. I will see to it that the entire board is provided with a copy.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm scrolling through again for anybody that wants to utilize the raised hand function of the app to provide testimony in support of this application. And I am seeing none. Scrolling again. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing. I'm going to open it up to anyone that wants to provide testimony in opposition to the application or otherwise express concern. So I will ask you to exercise the raised hand function on this app, and I will call on you alphabetically based on your first name, which now works. Okay, I'm scrolling through. I do not see anybody. I'm going to give you to the time of when I scroll down to the bottom next, and then I'm going to close it. So do it now. Nope. Okay, I do not see anybody. I'm going to close this portion of the public hearing. Thank you all for your testimony, and we will be extending public testimony via written comment to a date that we'll be determining at a later point in this meeting. So, thank you all for speaking. It does kind of elucidate how I'm viewing this master plan application. It is not specific buildings, so for any of you in the audience or any of you obviously on the board, we will be handling individual applications for individual buildings as they come up before us. This is a master plan special permit for the overall presentation, which is a broader view of what we're looking at now. So I've already provided some questions and some commentary the way I see the application. The only question I have for the applicant was based on one of the members of the public. Their question involved, and I believe it was Mr. McKenna. His question involved a path underneath the train tracks to connect Boynton Yards and Union Square. I'm assuming, and I hope you would know the answer far better than I, because it's your property, that in order to do something like that, you would either need to already have control over that underpass if one exists, or have to work with a whole bunch of competing stakeholders in order to make that work. I don't know if you have, or if that's something that's feasible. I honestly have no idea. It's the first time I've heard of that proposal, but it sounds like it's something that you'd at least need to work with the MBTA and the Commonwealth on, be able to control something like that. So I don't know if the applicant wants to address that now or punt for another day.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I just want to quickly note that Melissa would like to speak. And Melissa, I think that you're self-muted.
Melissa, why are you
Hi,
still
everyone.
on vacation?
It's Melissa Woods, back from vacation for a brief moment of time. But if I could address the Earl Street underpass, this is something that we did put in the Union Square neighborhood plan. Seeing a desirable urban design for more connections between Boynton Yards and Union Square. But since the publishing of the Union Square neighborhood plan, we've done more discovery about that topic. And although the Union Square plan makes it look feasible, we accounted for a structure for a bridge and an underpass that allows trucking. It did not account for the infrastructure that is under the tracks. So what would need to happen now is an underpass that is much longer to account for ramping to get under that infrastructure as well, and as really should have been something in a 1960 or 1970 plan, not a 2016 plan. So I can provide more information going back to my colleagues, but that's my understanding of where it sits today, that a vehicular connection is going to be pretty difficult. but pedestrian connections over the track are something that are more feasible.
Thank you very much, Melissa. I hope you just go on vacation and enjoy yourself. But you're stuck here with us, aren't you? At your own discretion. What I'd like to do now is open it up to additional members of the planning board to ask questions or to provide commentary at this point if you want. Certainly no obligation to, because we're going to be continuing the public testimony, and I always like to weigh my assessment on these based on the testimony that we get and responses that the applicant makes on those. But we can definitely see what we've got for the applicant now. Anybody? Go for it, Rob. You're muted, bro.
Thank you. And now I am unmuted. Thank you. I had a few questions, and I appreciate the discussion on the north-south connection, because that was something that had come up before. I guess I have a couple of questions, and I'll just articulate them, and then either we can talk about them now or later. One is, to what extent has this project explored something like, a pedestrian, if not a vehicular connection, as the neighborhood plan had illustrated? Has there been any investigation into a pedestrian, over the track connection, recognizing that, it can't be a bridge to nowhere, given that there is other landowners on the other side of the tracks? That's my first question. And my second major question was, I did want to ask, to what extent the applicant explored potentially having the parking entrance for building 2, instead of being on South Street, being on, either the west side of the building on Windsor Street, or potentially, from the north, as I think one of the commenters had asked. And the reason why I think that question is asked, and I think it's a good question, is, when and if South Street is aligned, you sort of end up with the stub of a parking entry cutting into what would otherwise be, open space. So those are my two questions this time. Thank you.
Do folks have anything to say in response to Rob's comments, or shall we move forward with anyone else that wants to provide testimony, and the applicant will be able to address us in a future meeting as well?
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking, and apparently we are having the same sort of roaming muting going on. So I am unmuting John Fenton again. Hopefully he can speak. Mr. Fenton, unfortunately, I find that I'm unable to unmute you successfully. Is there somebody else in your team who could speak for you? Try again. I'm gonna unmute Rob Buki.
Yeah, so let me start with Rob's second question first, and just be clear that so in the case of building 2, the main entrance to the building from a people standpoint, from a pedestrian access standpoint, is to the north and to the west. So that building is certainly designed with the idea that A, it turns towards Union Square, and B, that it also wraps around and relates to the civic space that's getting created in the initial phases. In the future anticipated South Street realignment, what we've tried to do is minimize the amount of land that's taken for the southern portion of that building to be used for loading and service. But we really had to make a choice as to, it's an interesting project because it really, it doesn't have, the building doesn't have necessarily a natural back. And so we tried to minimize really the back of the building, and we're trying to activate the majority of the building all around, but find a safe way to get vehicles off of the street, either in the current condition or the future condition, and to also provide a service and loading area, but to, in our early stage design of that building, to mask significantly that sort of podium space, so that the building reads as much as possible as a 4-sided building that doesn't really have a back to it. So from a pedestrian standpoint, we're clearly oriented towards Union Square and to the new civic space. And from a car and access standpoint, we really need to, in that day 1 condition, orient to the existing South Street in some way. Does that answer your question, Rob? And I think that'll become more clear. It's something we can certainly address in the next presentation more specifically, if that's helpful. But it will absolutely become more clear in the site plan review process for building 2, which is something that we're working hard on as we speak. I think in the other question regarding the pedestrian bridge, it is something that our team has had some familiarity with in other areas. It's, as was referenced earlier, the MBTA is not, it's a difficult process to get that approved, and it requires significant grade changes for bike and pedestrian, and it requires, landowners on the north side to be willing and cooperative to provide those landing areas. So I don't know, it's been, talked about. It hasn't really been actively evaluated, and in our discussions with planning has never been a major topic.
Does anybody else have any questions of the applicant or of staff at this point? Sam? So the rule is if the dog barks, we have to at least bark, right?
All right, I'm trying this
There we go.
again. Okay.
Just trying to figure out how to communicate that I needed to be unmuted while on mute. So I wanted to amplify a couple of the points that were made early in the public comments, specifically, first, a general point about the residential commercial balance. I think without speaking specifically to this project, and I do have a question for staff on this point, but I do think it's important for the board to remember that the concerns about residential and commercial balance are important ones. I think the chair's comments about commercial development increasing the city's tax base are well taken. but they're not the only concern. And I think we as a board and as a, frankly, as a city would do well to remember that. So I want to acknowledge that first comment and kind of amplify that to the extent that I can. On that point, the first question for staff, my understanding of the zoning ordinance, and I'd love to be corrected if I'm wrong about this, is that there are pretty strict requirements for the residential and commercial balance in this area. Is that right?
Yes, Sam, this is Melissa Woods again. This requires a 75% commercial space in any master plan special permit application.
So am I right in saying that the current balance of 75-25 is precisely what is the most residential that could be offered in this space?
You are correct.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, and hopefully that provides a little bit of context to some folks. I also, this isn't so much a question, it might be a comment for next time, but to the extent to the second comment that was made, and I'm sorry for forgetting folks' names or not getting their names. If there are benefits, or if there have been discussions about community benefits beyond what are required as a minimum, at minimum levels required by ordinance, it would be helpful. I think it would be useful for the public to understand what those are when any future presentations are made on this topic or for this project. That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam, very much. And I do appreciate your clarifying questions, because I think it's important for all of us to recognize what the parameters are that we're working with on a master plan special, special permit like this. What I would like to do, and first of all, before I continue, I didn't know if Jahan had anything that you wanted to add at this point. Okay, go for it. Yeah, you don't have to. Don't be bullied. That's okay.
He's on mute.
You need to unmute, my friend.
I think Rebecca has the control.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the applicant for providing a great presentation. I have two-part questions, items to consider for next time. One is directed towards the staff, and this relates to the staff memo, page 4. This refers to the viewing vistas in relation to Prospect Hill, and I'd love to get some more insight into that. I had the chance to read through it, but love additional commentary on that. And then the second question / I guess request for additional details would be around the retail space. In light of this ongoing pandemic, I'm distinctly concerned about the future of retail. This is going to be, I'm sure, a very vibrant community, both commercial and residential. Would love additional information, if possible, around retail, and also with respect to any benefits to the surrounding neighborhoods of Somerville. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Han, and for everybody who might be in attendance. My video was screwing up for a bit, but my audio never did, so I was still able to hear everything, just for the purpose of the record. So I do want to give staff and the applicant any last opportunity this evening if they have to respond to anything if they feel it's appropriate. If not, I'm going to make sure that everyone knows. I do understand that there was a little bit of a concern with folks being able to exercise the raised hand option, to know where it is, to how to do it, and I understand that it's a challenging time for all of us to try to get used to different technologies and internet capacities, and that's part of the benefit of being able to take written testimony as well. It's not always the best way to do it, to say, I'm sorry, we couldn't make it work, but you can provide written testimony. But it is the same thing under the law. We do take all of the testimony that we receive, both written and oral, under the same amount of consideration. So what I would like to do at this point is, if Rebecca could remind us when our next meeting is. I think it's in 2 weeks, but I could be wrong. Usually it's 2.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. The next regularly scheduled planning board meeting will be on the 17th. There is a joint meeting of the planning board and land use committee on the 15th, but that will be for the purpose of taking testimony on some map changes, and that will not be a regular planning board meeting.
Right. So on that, the planning board would appreciate seeing which map changes are going to be at issue on the 15th, because this is now a 7-year-long project that has had copious amounts of public testimony and input to a granular level. So I'm very curious to see what the additional map changes, proposed map changes, are going to be, why they're being proposed now in 2020, and all of that good stuff. But that's for a public hearing of a different day. This will be continued until the 17th. I'm going to leave it open for written testimony to, correct me if I'm wrong, planning@somervillema.gov.
That's correct.
Okay, planning@somervillema.gov for any folks that would like to provide written testimony to the planning board on this application. We get it all, we read it all, we synthesize it all with our thoughts. So please provide your testimony as you desire. And is there anything else that staff or members of the board would like to add for the benefit of this meeting?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, seeing none. Hey, Melissa, are you still on?
Still here, Michael.
Why? Go on vacation, we're done.
It seems like you're going to adjourn, so.
We're about to. Okay, seeing no other testimony and no other questions and no other comments, the chair moves to adjourn. The clerk seconds. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Okay, with a unanimous vote to adjourn, the planning board is through for this evening. We will reconvene.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we've been having some issues. Did you formally have a roll call vote to continue to the next meeting?
We did not.
No, we didn't. We usually do not.
All right.
We usually don't continue existing hearings to the next meeting because we've continued the written testimony to a next meeting. But if you believe that it's appropriate for us to continue it technically to the next meeting, we will.
Well, I was trying to make sure I captured accurately the date that you were extending the comments to, and I don't believe I have that.
Did I not say that out loud, or was it just in my?
I didn't write it down, Mr. Chair, so I apologize if it's me.
Oh, no, it's probably my fault. It's Friday the 11th at noon, which is the Friday before our next meeting.
Thank you very much.
The planning board traditionally extends written comment.
All right, then.
So, yeah, with this clarification made, the planning board has moved to adjourn. That motion was seconded and voted unanimously. Planning board is now in adjournment. So thank you all for your attendance and your testimony, and we'll see you in a few weeks. And if you want to attend the joint hearing between the planning board and land use committee, that should be fun.
Thank you all, and thank you to folks who are in attendance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a great night.